исламское государство нацеливается на господство в исламском мире. И не только там. Только этими планами явно не ограничиваются.
Live from RTHQ in Moscow, it's Kevin Owen with you this hour. Thanks for your company. One story dominating, breaking news to tell you about too. Russia has expanded today its anti-terrorist military action in Syria and conducted its first naval strikes on ISIL targets from warships in the Caspian Sea. Well, let's get up to speed on the developments. There have been a lot of them in the last few hours. RT's Daniel Hawkins says the latest on these latest strikes. Been a big turn of events today, Dan, hasn't it?
Absolutely, Kevin. The latest news, as we heard, that the Russian Navy have been in action in the Caspian Sea. From the Ministry of Defense, we heard around 4 ships in this area fired a total of 26 missiles at targets in Syria, in Al-Raqqa province, of course, ISIL's de facto capital in the country, as well as further west towards Aleppo and Idlib, where there is also a militant presence. Now, according to the Ministry of Defense, all of these missiles hit their targets. Let's hear more about what they had to say.
Сегодня утром привлекли корабли Каспийской флотилии.
This morning, we used ships from the Caspian Flotilla. 4 warships fired 26 caliber cruise missiles, hitting 11 targets, all of which were destroyed. There were no civilian casualties. The results of the strikes showed the effectiveness of rockets being fired from long range, almost 1,500 kilometers.
We know how difficult such anti-terror operations are. Of course, it's too early to draw conclusions, but everything that's already been done certainly deserves the highest praise.
Now, these ships in the Caspian would have been part of Russia's Caspian Sea flotilla. That consists of around 30 ships, many of which would have been at the very cutting edge of Russian naval technology. You can see some of them here. Now, they would have used equipment such as the NK caliber missile that can target offshore and onshore targets from over 2,500 kilometers and has a speed of over 3,500 kilometers per hour. According to the Ministry of Defense in Russia, the route of these missiles was predetermined with partners. They flew through Iran, passing through northern Iraq and subsequently hitting their targets. The areas which they flew through were uninhabited to minimize civilian casualties, and the targets included I've got the MOD statement right in front of me here. I'll just translate it for you. They included munition and explosive factories, ammunition dumps, and also training centers in those key provinces under pressure from ISIL. They hit those targets with a 3-meter accuracy, so extremely precise laser-guided weaponry here, and really marking an escalation in these operations against ISIL, of course. No troops on the ground, no plans to put troops on the ground, but their aerial campaign very much active and now fully supported by the Navy as well. So very much an intensifying, as the ministry said, of operations over the last 24 hours.
Yeah, and other countries as well making comment on it too. We'll talk about that shortly. Dan, for now, thanks. Coming back to you later. Let's go to Neil Clark, political analyst. He's joining us live. Hi there, Neil. A lot to cover today. Vladimir Putin says he's received a proposal from the French president to form a, maybe you would think, surprising coalition between Assad and the Free Syrian Army. Now, at first thought, you'd think they were polar opposites, but could this work? Let's take a listen first, actually. I gather we've got his from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Let's listen to Putin. Come straight back.
French President Francois Hollande suggested an interesting idea to try and join the efforts of President Assad's forces and the so-called Free Syrian Army. Admittedly, we still don't know who leads them or who they even are. But if it is a military wing of the so-called moderate part of the opposition, then it could be useful to join efforts against a common enemy such as ISIL, Jabhat al-Nusra, and other terrorist groups.
Assad needs to go.
Assad has to go.
Assad cannot be a credible partner for us.
It is time for him to go.
He definitely has to be part of the negotiations.
Political resolution can only come about through negotiation.
We have to acknowledge this is a total failure.
Let's not kid ourselves, that's a joke.
Our coalition is on the offensive. ISIL is on the defensive, and ISIL is going to lose.
All right, let's just reiterate and clarify our breaking news for you then here on RT International. So, the Russian Defense Ministry has released footage of its first airstrikes conducted in Syria against Islamic State. Now, according to the ministry, Russian fighter jets hit 8 ISIL targets today, having conducted 20 missions in total. And crucially, these are in areas where there were no civilians. Now, they targeted ISIL command and control centres based in mountainous terrain areas. The operation was indeed carried out with the coordination with the Syrian intelligence, and that's obviously what makes this mission different to what's happening by the West.
Used the country's air force in Syria, with Islamic State named by Moscow as a threat to its national interests. And the Russian move has been welcomed by the Syrian government. Moscow was earlier asked by Damascus for more help in the fight against terrorists. Western governments have started changing their minds over the role and the future of President Assad and his government in Syria. So we could be looking at a big change in a, well, ultimately Western strategy on Syria.
Assad needs to go.
Assad has to go.
Assad cannot be a credible partner for us.
It is time for him to go.
He definitely has to be part of the negotiations.
Political resolution can only come about through negotiation.
We have to acknowledge this is a total failure.
Let's not kid ourselves, that's a joke.
Our coalition is on the offensive. ISIL is on the defensive, and ISIL is going to lose.